When PETA asked one of Oregon's top public research facilities to produce a record of its experiments, they refused. PETA had to sue. How the fight for animal rights is increasingly the fight for public documents. Next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights, brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, OHSU, the Oregon Health and Science University, and how experimenters fight tooth and nail for their right to conduct useless and cruel experiments. It's how vivisectors try to fight off animal rights activists when PETA, on behalf of the animals, confronts the researchers, like asks them for public documents that we have the right to see. The big public institutions like OHSU play dumb and tell PETA, sue us. And so much of animal rights is fought in court to wrest away the evidence that expose cruel and wasteful science. Recently, a court ordered Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, to pay PETA $434,000 after the university went to extreme and illegal lengths to keep hidden videos of absurd experiments of drunken voles. That's right, voles, V-O-L-E-S. They made them drunk and then tested to see how social they became in terms of their infidelity to their regular mates. Dr. Alka Chandna gives us an inside look on how using the Open Records Act to get public documents has become an essential animal rights tool on the PETA Podcast.
Oregon Health and Science University, or OHSU, is a public university based in Portland, Oregon. It also operates the Oregon National Primate Research Center, which is one of the 7 national primate research centers in the country. These are massive facilities with hundreds of monkeys and other primates who are bred for the purpose of being used in cruel and deadly experiments.
PETA just won this open records lawsuit, and they've been ordered to pay PETA $434,000. This is a big victory for PETA.
It's a big victory for PETA. It's also a big victory for transparency and accountability for taxpayers, people who care about animals, democracy. It's a victory for all of these things.
So what were the records exactly, and why was it important for PETA to obtain these records?
Back in 2017, we learned, because OHSU issued a press release, we learned that there was an experimenter at the university who used prairie voles in experiments intended to document that there's a connection between excessive alcohol consumption and infidelity. Our curiosity about this was piqued, and we saw from the news release that there was a reference to a published paper. We looked at the paper, and basically, to put this in a nutshell, the experimenter was using 150 prairie voles. These are small, social animals, very intelligent, considered to be socially monogamous. And the experimenter was pairing the prairie voles, male-female pairs, for 2 weeks. Then he would give the males the equivalent of 15 bottles of wine a day. And the drunken voles, male voles, were then plopped into an experimental cage with the partner female tethered to one end of the cage and an unfamiliar female tethered to the other. And the experimenters videoed this experiment, and they would measure how much time the male vole spent huddling with the so-called partner female versus the unfamiliar female. And from this bizarre and frankly cruel experiment, they said that there was a connection, that the male vole was more likely to huddle with the unfamiliar female. Huddling is not a euphemism for having sex. It means like sitting next to.
But wait a minute. That could be vole sex, I guess, or vole. No,
No, voles are mammals and they have sex. Their sex is not just huddling.
So cuddling or huddling. Well, just your description of this, it just sounds strange. This is science?
Precisely. That was our question. And immediately when we saw the news release, we wrote to the university, wrote to the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, which saw fit to approve this bizarre experiment. And we said, how could you do this? This is not translatable to human beings. You could stand outside a bar on a Saturday night and make some observations about whether people who are obscenely drunk are then going to make bad decisions about fidelity or anything else. We just know this to be true. This is not something for which you need to torment voles, keep them imprisoned in a laboratory, and eventually kill them, which is what the paper documented, that all of the voles were killed, including any fetuses that came out of actual partnering. And their brains were, excised from their bodies and dissected.
Yes, or they were given all this alcohol. That's not common, is it?
Well, voles don't drink alcohol in nature. That's, definitely true. And to drink to that extent, it is a reflection of how sterile the conditions are in which these animals are forced to live. These animals are living in unnatural conditions. They never feel the sun on their backs, the wind in their face, or the ground under their feet. They're in plastic boxes for the entirety of their lives. They can't control anything that happens to them. And I dare to say that human beings in similar conditions of privation also turn to alcohol, or they abuse drugs, or whatever it might be. The excessive consumption of alcohol is a function of these conditions of extreme privation.
But also they were forced to drink, right? They were given the alcohol. It wasn't a voluntarily derived thing where, I'm a vole, I'm in this situation, give me a drink. They forced the voles to drink, right?
The voles were given a choice of water or alcohol. But I go back to the fact that they live in conditions of privation. And I think that anyone living such miserable, horrible lives, where really they're stuck in a plastic cage. I mean, imagine living in a phone booth. That's really what it is. Living in a phone booth, nothing to do, no friends, no family, nothing, nothing to play with, nothing to make your life interesting. And you're given a choice between water or alcohol. I can tell you right now, I would choose the alcohol.
Well, so the fact that this is science, did anything come out of this? Did the scientific researcher then say, oh, look at this research and it's going to improve the life of voles and human beings? Or did it do anything positive at all?
No, it just wasted a lot of taxpayer dollars, caused just for this one paper, 150 voles to be killed, and caused torment, suffering, and the experiments, more experiments were done, which were variations on the theme. No, this has no human applicability. There is nothing novel or interesting that comes out of it. The conclusion that male voles are more likely to, quote unquote, cheat on their partners if they're, raging blind drunk is not something that would be surprising to anybody. You could ask like even a youngster in high school what they thought the conclusion would be, and they would come up with the right answer.
So PETA wanted the records or wanted to know more about this. You cited an open records request. They blocked you. PETA filed the open records lawsuit and won. Oregon Health Science university was ordered to pay PETA $434,000. So a victory for PETA. What does it mean in terms of stopping future experiments along these lines?
I think it's huge. What happened there with OHSU is that in early 2018, we submitted our public records request. The paper that was published in November of 2017 stated that the experimenters had videotaped these different experiments. The one that I described earlier, where the two females tethered and the male dropped in between, and then also something called the resident intruder test, which involved a male vole in a cage and a quote unquote intruder vole dropped into the cage. And then the experimenters would document them fighting. So there were these videos, and we requested the videos in addition to protocols, experimental protocols, et cetera. First, OHSU told us that the videos didn't belong to them. They belonged to another facility, the VA. So we went to the VA, and after a bit of a runaround, we were told, the principal investigator, the lead experimenter, deleted those videos. They don't exist anymore. They took the data out and they deleted the videos. Now, leaving aside the point that that's illegal because these were federally funded experiments, and experimenters are required to maintain these primary documents for a period of 3 years. They were running up the clock, essentially. Every time that they, basically threw a wrench in our path to say, the videos aren't here. First, they were just saying, we don't have the videos. So there were all these questions around, did we use the right time interval? Should we, did the videos exist earlier than this? Or did we not specify something else? And it was just this massive runaround. And eventually, they said that the videos were no longer in existence. They had been deleted. When the lawsuit was filed, PETA also hired a computer forensic specialist. But through the work of that individual, we found these videos sitting where they would have been found if anybody at OHSU had been doing their job. They were on an OHSU laptop. They were right there on the OHSU lab computer. And so we did eventually get the videos. And when I saw the videos, I thought, well, no wonder they didn't want to give us the videos. They're horrendous. And it goes back to your question, Emil, is this really science? And I think anybody who looks at these videos, whether it's the so-called partner preference test or the resident intruder test with the male voles fighting, looking at the videos, just because you measure how much time a male vole spends with one female or the other, or, you measure how many times one male vole lunges at another or bites another or chases another, that's not science. Measurement doesn't make it science. It's bogus from start to finish. It's absurd, it's cruel, and it's a waste of tax dollars.
We apparently see a lot of this, or PETA has. This is why maybe it's important to get to these records requests so you can expose them. So tell me, how common is it for universities to deny records requests like this because they don't want to be exposed or they don't want to be ashamed by their actions?
It's alarmingly common. And whether you're talking about very elite institutions like OHSU, Oregon Health and Science University, University of Washington, University of Massachusetts Amherst, or you're talking about other institutions like Louisiana State University, all of these facilities, when we submit, and these are all public institutions, we submit public records requests, which is something that enshrines these very important principles of transparency and accountability. These are central pillars of democracy, transparency, to know what's happening at public institutions. And it's only when you know what's happening can you have accountability. We know that the majority of Americans, according to a Pew Research poll, the majority of Americans don't agree with the use of animals in experimentation. And yet we are forced through our taxes to pay for what's going on in these places. And so there needs to be accountability. The American public deserves to know what's going on with their tax dollars in these facilities. And yet, when we do something very simple, requesting documents, whether these are protocols or veterinary care records or records documenting adverse events, something terribly wrong happens, or videos, photographs, we submit these records requests for these different documents that are of great public interest. And then we have all of these hurdles erected by the institutions. So they're very happy to put out their hand and say, more money, please, getting money from NIH, which is our tax dollars. They're very happy to put out their hand. They're very happy to publish papers with their names and everything else. But when it comes to saying, show us what you've done, what has happened to the animals, give us the protocols, give us the veterinary care records. We want to know if animals died in their cages. We want to know if, somebody forgot to feed the animals, give water to the animals, didn't give pain relief to the animals. We want to know this, and we deserve to know this. We have a right to know this. And yet the institutions will, as I said, throw all of these hurdles in our paths.
So this is important because people see that Oregon Health and Science University had to pay $434,000. What kind of impact has this had on that one particular case? And has PETA filed other lawsuits?
We are and have been establishing a track record of not allowing universities or other public institutions to basically, show us the door when we ask for public records. I think that if I were just an individual, without the resources of an organization like PETA, it would be very difficult for me. I'm not a lawyer. Say I'm interested in receiving these records, seeing the records, and then the university uses all kinds of legalese to say, oh, under this exemption, we're not going to give this, oh, these are trade secrets, or no, you can't have this because we haven't published this yet. By the way, these are things that are actually said and often shown to be entirely specious. They sound good, when they come out of the mouth of, one of the university's attorneys. But, when you actually start unpacking the excuses that are thrown forward, you find that there's really no there. And then the other thing that we see from universities is that they charge insane amounts of money. So perhaps for 50 pages of documents, they're charging thousands of dollars. And again, I go back to, if I were just an American citizen concerned about the treatment of animals in laboratories, and I submitted the types of public records requests that PETA is submitting, and these are totally reasonable requests. And then I was told, okay, it's going to cost you $4,000. I would probably have to pack up my bags and say, okay, well, thanks, but no thanks. And this is what the universities and other, government laboratories and others, that's what they're banking on. They're hoping that we will say, well, we don't want to fight this. We don't have enough energy or time or, resources to do this. So we're just going to go away. That's what they're banking on. And so what PETA has been trying to do, certainly as long as I've been with the organization, and definitely before that as well, is show a track record. We do not take no for an answer. And what I've seen through my time working on these issues is that time after time after time, we prevail. The universities have lawyers and a lot of resources. And NIH, the National Institutes of Health, massive government agency with massive resources. They have their whole army of lawyers, but we've got lawyers too. And the animals have a lot of friends. So in a lot of these instances with public records disputes, we have had attorneys who work for us pro bono or work for us pennies on the dollar. A lot of people care about animals, and the institutions that exploit animals, these laboratories, they should know this. I mean, they've been sort of slow at understanding, that we are going to come after them, that we will pry those records out of their abusive hands. They've been slow at learning, but, hopefully the message is getting through.
So Alka, PETA has also filed other lawsuits. Tell me about the current suit against UMass Amherst.
Sure. So at the university, this is our second lawsuit against University of Massachusetts Amherst. The first lawsuit was involving a whole collection of videos that were taken at various primate centers, the National Primate Research Centers that I referenced earlier. So an experimenter named Melinda Novak, who was at the time at UMass, she had collected these videos from these different primate centers to look at stereotypic behaviors in monkeys. And stereotypic behaviors, I'm sure most of your listeners know, are these repetitive motions that we see in monkeys. They're indicative of extreme psychological distress. So we wanted these videos, and we requested these along with some protocols and some other information. And UMass said no. And so we took them to court. We prevailed. We got the videos, and we were able to publicize them. Again, people deserve to know what's going on in these laboratories. Now, more recently, and this is a current lawsuit, we had learned that at UMass, there's an experimenter named Agnes LaCruz, and she uses marmosets. Marmosets are these very small 1-pound New World monkeys who are very social, monogamous animals. The thing to know about marmosets, although I don't think generally when you're thinking about animal behavior, you wonder about this, but female marmosets do not experience menopause. This is crucial in this discussion because Agnes LaCruz uses marmosets to study menopause, even though marmosets don't experience menopause. So this is horrifying. Again, through a review of her published papers, we determined that LaCruz had taken video footage and photos of the marmosets in her lab, doing various experiments, including something called it's a social deprivation experiment where partners are separated, and one is put in a room separate from the other marmosets, and they videotape that poor marmoset alone, not knowing what's going on, in terrible distress. So, that was one set of videos, and there were other videos. And UMass chose not to give those videos to us, and again, putting forward all of these totally specious arguments. So we've taken them to court, and we'll see how that pans out.
So it sounds like the upshot is that the records are needed to expose the bad science and to show the public how money is wasted, how money is spent at these public universities in their name on these cruel experiments. And does having the records and do they have the impact of stopping the cruelty? Are the universities learning that they can't do this?
Yeah, absolutely. It has a huge impact. Emil, I think about this one example. I was saying earlier, it's not just universities, but other public bodies as well, like the National Institutes of Health, which we talked about before. So NIH is a federal agency. It's a massive, massive enterprise. I think its annual budget, which it receives through appropriations. So every cent that NIH has is taxpayer money. And I believe their budget is around $44 billion right now per year, billion with a B. So this is a massive agency. Some years ago, PETA requested protocols and video footage associated with maternal deprivation experiments on infant monkeys. So there was a guy named Stephen Sumi, an experimenter at NIH, so in the agency's intramural laboratories. And Sumi was breeding monkeys so that they were genetically predisposed to be more fearful, more depressed, more anxious than normal monkeys. And on the very day they were born, he would remove the babies from their mothers permanently and then enroll the babies in a battery of psychological tests. And there were videos of these psychological tests. We requested them. NIH came back and they said, okay, we want $100,000 for these videos. Now PETA is the largest animal rights organization in the world. We have more than 9.5 million members and supporters. We are a strong player for the animals, but $100,000 is not something that we bat our eye. It's not something that we take lightly. And so this was really interesting. It wasn't even that our attorneys needed to get involved. One of our employees at the time, Jeremy Beckham, he wrote back and argued that this was totally beyond the pale, that they were charging so much money. Anyway, there was a bit of a back and forth, and eventually NIH dropped all the didn't charge us anything except for the cost of the external memory drive. And that was so funny because they were charging something like $150 for that, down from $100,000. And Jeremy took argument with that as well. And he said, why are you charging us $150? I can see right here on Amazon that you can get one of these external memory drives that has that much memory, for a fraction of that. So we're very conscious of how we spend our money. But the point is, NIH, again, an agency, every cent that that runs through that agency, that operates that agency, that keeps the lights on, everything else comes from tax dollars. When a taxpayer, Jeremy Beckham, working on behalf of PETA, requests some documents, public documents from them, which are known to be of considerable public interest, they say, okay, $100,000. Like, have you not received enough of our money that you need $100,000 just to give us videos that are right there on your computers? With the videos, we were able to go public, and we're able to say these videos were just shot in NIH's laboratory. This is the legacy of Harry Harlow from the 1960s, 1970s, but it's happening right now in NIH's lab. We were able to say that, and we had a very spirited, vigorous campaign. And after 18 months, the experiments were stopped. The laboratory was shut down. And Stephen Sumi, basically retired with this disgrace, appropriately, placed around his neck. He had been abusing monkeys since he was a graduate student. And we called him out for it, got his records, got his video footage. They say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and video footage can actually save lives. This is really critical. And of course, NIH knew that when they charged us $100,000. This is their whole game. They know that if we obtain those records, if we get things like veterinary care records showing that animals are in distress, showing that animals are not receiving veterinary care, showing that animals are dying in their cages. If we get those veterinary care records, if we get video footage that can show the public this is what's going on right now. If I were to say to somebody, oh, that there are maternal deprivation experiments happening at NIH right now, they would say, you are so out of touch. Those things ended, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But when I say, no, this is video footage from, a year ago, they can't discount that. They can't dispute that what is being presented is real.
Yeah, it's all about the evidence. It's all about catching them in the act. And that is the importance of open records lawsuits and the importance of this.
Exactly, Emil. And, the hope is that the experimentation industry is also taking notes. They can, push us to file lawsuits, and we will. And they can, try to make their specious arguments, and they will. But our track record is very strong. We are prevailing everywhere. And, so they could spare themselves a lot of agony. The other thing that I might say to our opponents is lawsuits are very good for media. The media is very interested in lawsuits. They may be less interested in the animal issue sometimes and more interested in lawsuits. So if the universities want, their dirty laundry, which is what the animal experimentation laboratories are, their filthy, horrible, violent, ugly laundry, if they want it paraded in front of the public, that's fine. We're happy with that. And we're happy to facilitate that too.
Dr. Alka Chandna, PETA VP, Laboratory Investigations. Read more about PETA's fight to get the documents that expose the cruel and absurd experiments of the Oregon Health and Science University at PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, EMIL, AMOK, or see my vlog at AMOK.com, or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Or get this podcast on YouTube at Emil Amok 1. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to, as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.